much to do, there's plenty on the farm. I'll sleep when I'm dead. Saturday night, I like to raise a little harm. I'll sleep when I'm dead. Hey! I'm drinking heartbreak motor or the Bombay gin. I'll sleep when I'm dead. Straight from the bottom, twisted again. I'll sleep when I'm dead. All right.
And that is Warren Zevon. I'll sleep when I'm dead. And sadly, Warren is resting right now. And today on the Community Pilot Show, I'm turning over the microphones and to my guest, Aralyn Hughes. I'm calling the show Aralyn 2. Not sure what it's about, but Warren might have given you a little bit of hint. She has some guests, and she'll be introducing them. Aralyn, it's all yours.
Okay. Well, thanks for letting me be here today. And I am going to kind of recreate a coffee group that I do and have done for about 4 years. And I do it every Tuesday, and people can come and go kind of as they want. And I introduce a topic by storytelling. It's not a lecture. It's not a learning experience in that way. It's more of a learning experience from your aha moments, I guess you would say. And then I open the group up, and people get like 2 or 3 minutes to kind of comment on the topic. And we talk about infidelity, we talk about pornography, we talk about starting over, we talk about monogamy, we talk about breast, have all kinds of topics we talk about. And if you are interested in being a part of that coffee group, you can check it out on Facebook. It's Aralyn's Tuesday Coffee Clatch, and clatch is spelled with a C. And Aralyn, for all intensive purposes, is spelled A-R-A-L-Y-N. And you can find out all about me at aralyn.com, A-R-A-L-Y-N.com. So I'm not going to tell you a lot of stuff, except for the fact that I'm kind of known as the Queen of Weird in Austin. I'm 72 years old, and at this point in my life, I have more of a past than I do a future. And that is an interesting way to look at it. In the past, I used to say, oh, that won't happen until I'm dead and gone. Now I say, oh, that won't happen until I'm dead and gone. And I'm thinking, you know, I have probably about 18 years if I live to the age that my parents lived, which was like 90-something. So it's an interesting way to look at it. In the coffee topics, we never talk about politics, and we don't talk about religion. We figure we get enough of that somewhere else, and so that's kind of our focus. And I have guests in the studio with me today, 3 people that periodically come and are part of the coffee. I have Ken, who's visiting from Houston, and he comes to the coffee off and on. And I have Florence, who is in and out of the coffee for some time. And then I have Mary Catherine, who is pretty much of a regular unless she's on vacation, sick, or has a doctor's appointment, something like that. So I would like for them to introduce themselves by saying their name and giving you the answer to the question, do you have more of a past or a future? I'm Aralyn. I have more of a past.
This is Ken. I live in Houston, and on Tuesdays, if I'm in Austin, I go to Aralyn's Coffee Group, which is a group of people who get together and talk about what she just said. And I used to live in Austin in the 70s, now I live in crazy Houston, and by going to her group, I get a good perspective about the thought patterns that are going on in Austin, about the different people. There's a great diversity of people there, and I really enjoy it. And when I do get on Tuesday mornings, her coffee group is open to everybody, and I would highly recommend it. On answer to her questions, I live in the present, but I am very aware about how my past got me there and how that past and the present is going to project me into the future. Thank you.
Florence, do you have more of a past or more of a future?
I definitely have a past, but I'd like to think I have more of a future.
I'm Mary Catherine, and I have much more of a past. And as I get older, I realize that my future is shorter and looking at planning goals in shorter cycles.
I've thought sometimes about having a workshop, how not to ever die. And I think it would be a blockbuster. I think I'd have to have people standing in line and waiting to get into that workshop. But unfortunately, people don't like to talk about death. When I was growing up in the 60s, sex was the taboo topic. Now, sex is more of a topic that we're okay to talk about, but people definitely don't want to talk about death. When I talk about death, people say, oh, let's talk about something positive. But I like to continue to create conversations around death and around dying, because it's like anything else. The more you know about death and dying and what your expectations are going to be and if they're going to be met, you're going to be less overwhelmed and less afraid. Death for most people and their families, unfortunately, is a train wreck. Finances are in disarray, failure to downsize, and people are left with these houses to clean out of their parents, where they have a 4-bedroom house and they've never thrown away anything since 1945. And then also, sometimes when things are not clear about what someone wants after they die, the siblings who have been peaceful and happy and loved each other are suddenly fighting over a piece of furniture, or they're fighting over whether or not to sell the house or whether or not to pull the plug. It's all these questions. And also, I like to always think that this death is one place there is no discrimination. When I was a kid, there was this little song that we sang, and it was red or yellow, black or white, we are precious in his sight. Jesus loves the little children, one and all. And there's no discrimination issues in death. It can take the young or the old, and it doesn't matter what color or what religion or anything else. The other thing I sometimes think about is we need to go on and die, because it's going to be too crowded here if we continue to live. We need to move over and let the other people take our space. That's what it's about. People die, people are born, and it kind of keeps things going. And also, just think, if we all lived forever, what would we do to Social Security? Oh my gosh. So I think it's honorable to die. It's honorable to move over and make room for other people. And I often ask people, what is wrong with dying? And people said, I'm just not going to die. I'm going to live to be 100. And I think, oh my God, that I would live to be 100? I can't think of anything. That would be a fate worse than death for me. I have a fear of not being able to die when I want to, like being in a coma or something and not being able to move on. So I would like to ask my guest, what do they think about growing old? And do you think it's too crowded? Are you ready to go? Let's just make the question this. Would you like to live to be 100 years old? Ken, what do you think?
Yes.
Okay. Florence, would you like to live to be 100 years old? How old are you now?
I'm 45.
That's why you have more of a future than a past, but do you want to live to be 100?
I like to think of it as that I'm, grateful. Yeah, try to remember to be grateful that I'm here every day. And if I had my health, so there would be some good conditions, I think, that went with that. And my sense of humor, and I could still enjoy life. Definitely, if I still connected to other people.
Well, I'm Mary Catherine, and I want to live as long as I have my mind and I can interact with other people. Death is becoming something as I get older that is okay, and I'm accepting more and more. I don't know if any of us really totally accept it till it's knocking at our door, but I'll live as long as I have my mind. I hope.
Well, this is Undercover Greg here, and I was going to contribute my approach to sports. I will continue to play as long as I can contribute and compete, and I think pretty much that's what my goal is in life, as long as I can continue to do these things. But I also recognize the time to step aside. There is a time to step aside, even when you're 45. You need to make sure you realize that you're in a cycle of life, as the song goes, and that we're feeding the next generation in many ways.
Yes. I mean, death is, now that I've done a lot of study on death and dying and become well acquainted with it, I said to somebody the other day, death sounds so fascinating, I just can't wait. And they were like, oh, Aralyn, but I think as you get older, it's harder to find new experiences. And one thing that I know is dying will be a new experience for me. So that's why I kind of look forward to it. I'm not going to do anything, take myself out early or any of that kind of stuff, but I'm just going to say when the time comes, I'm going to look at it as an experience, and I'm going to be present, and I'm going to be watching to see what that's like. And I always say, when you're in a room at a party, or even in this room today, we have 6 people here, and I always say, within a year, maybe 2 years, someone in this group will be dead. And is it the person sitting next to you, the person across from you? And everyone in the room is always looking of who they think it might be, because they never think it's going to be themselves. What I can share with you now that I'm aging is that there's something that happens with aging, and that is you start to shrink. Shrinking is a part of dying. Your feet get smaller, your ears get bigger, because as you're shrinking, things are changing in size. So your ears get bigger, often your hands get bigger. If you think about older people, they have bigger ears and their hands are bigger. And the physically things start to change and be different. Your back hurts, you can't see, you can't hear as well as you used to. Some people like myself have a pacemaker. And your mind, as I say, kind of skips like a needle on a record. And many of us have less hair and we're more frail. I fell down in my own house the other day. I just tripped over the vacuum cleaner as I came tearing around. The other thing is, and I really love this, I take more naps. Because the truth of the matter is, sleep experts will tell you that if you think you're ever going to sleep like a baby again, that's wrong. From the day you're born, you will start to have more uncomfortable, shorter, disturbed sleep. So being older and having disturbed sleep, not being able to go to sleep, getting up in the middle of the night and having a snack and reading a book or watching TV is perfectly normal. And so I think that's why when you're older, you have to have naps. Now, we cannot talk about death, of course, unless we talk about what happens to our remains. People don't like to talk about that, but they really should make a decision and let it be known. There's lots of options. One, you could be embalmed. And let me tell you, that's the last on my list, because I don't want to have all those toxic chemicals in my body, and I don't want to be storing them in the ground with me. And I also don't want to have a casket. The expensive ones are made out of steel, and they're expensive. And why the heck would you put all that steel and toxic waste into the ground? You could be cremated instead, and that's a choice that a lot of people are making today. You can donate your body to science, and you can even donate your body to a body farm. We have one not far from San Antonio, and what you do is you just donate your body. They take it, they throw it out in the air. I mean, you don't have any covering or anything, and they study it. And so some people find that's awful. I thought it was a pretty good idea myself, but you have to have a lot of things about like getting your body there within a certain period of time after you die. I myself have chosen to do an eco-green burial. That means that I'm going to be buried, with a silk or cotton wrap of some kind, and I'm going to be put in the appropriate depth in the ground. and covered up and left. And so my body will go back into the ground, in the soil, like a lot of animals, and it just seems to make sense for me. I'd like to take a little break now, and when we come back, I want to hear what everyone else thinks about what they're going to do with their remains.
I was just thinking that I have a future in forensic science with that burial system there. But we'll take a break here, some underwriter announcements. We'll be right back with Aralyn Hughes. This is the Community Pilot Show, open to our programmers, our volunteers, and, as you're hearing today, our listeners. I have the pleasure of having Aralyn Hughes in the studio with me again today. And if you're interested in this show or anything else about the show or being on this show, you can contact me at undercovergreg@koop.org. Aralyn, back to you.
Okay. Well, I'd just like to remind people that at www.aralyn.com, Aralyn being spelled Aralyn, you can find lots more about me, about my one-woman shows, about the documentary film that was done on me, about a book that I wrote, women of the 60s, now in their 60s, who chose not to have children. And it's a pretty fun website, so that might be interesting for you. And you can sign up to be a part of the coffee group. And, of course, you have access to my email there, which is aralyn@aralyn.com. And you can write me about anything or any comments that you have about death. We're talking about death and dying today. I have 3 guests in the studio. And in our coffee group that we do every Tuesday, after I've presented kind of the topic and some ideas about that, I open it up to the group, and they take 2 or 3 minutes to respond or say whatever's on their mind or what their mind had prompted them to think about, some memory or whatever, after that conversation. So I'm going to go to my guests. They'll say their name, and they're going to tell what they think they're going to do with their remains after they die. And they're going to make any comments that they have about the discussion we had earlier. And if you're just tuning in, just fly with it.
Okay, this is Ken, and before the break, Aralyn mentioned something that I'd like to thank her for paying tribute to shrinkage in old age, because I am pushing 70 years old, and every day I think a little more about the end looming in the distance. And myself personally, I think that after we die, we're going to be absorbed into the oneness of the physical world that we live in. And therefore, I have chosen cremation and scattering of the ashes as the quickest way for me to be absorbed into the oneness of the universe. And I think that people that are buried eventually will be absorbed, but it's going to take them longer, and they're going to miss out seeing whether or not global warming actually is going to occur. So I look forward to being absorbed into the oneness, and it lessens my fear of death.
Well, that's what we're doing. The more you talk about death, the more familiar it is, and the easier it is to know that that's just a part of life, and we're all going to do it. Florence, what do you have to comment on today?
I totally agree, that we should talk about death more and just, be more present with it in our lives, just because it reminds us to appreciate, what you have. And I mean, personally feel like I've faced death several times. And so, I'm glad to be alive. And I feel like, I could have been gone, and just, it makes you, I think it can actually make you feel more alive when you think about death. And I also just wanted to say, I think it's a gift. I think there's a value to it, that, beyond fear. And I personally think we were kind of recycled as souls and spirits, and that we come back. And as far as just at the end of life, I always thought that, like Ken, I wanted to be cremated and have my ashes scattered over the ocean or the land, and just kind of be able to, just not be in one place where people come and mourn me or something like that. But I've also heard of these green burials too, because cremation has some other, consequences to it too.
Puts a lot of CO2 in the air.
Yeah. But
Mary Catherine, do you have a comment or two?
I do. Some of my thoughts has changed as I get older. And as far as what happens to what remains of my cells and body after I die, it's going to be totally up to my daughters. I don't care. Whatever they would like to do. My preference would be cremation or donate my body to science. And it's something that I do talk about to my daughters quite a bit. I'm like Aralyn, I don't know what the future holds. And we've become so removed from death in our society, I think we fear it because of that, instead of just incorporating into it's a part of our life. That is the one thing we all have in common.
I want to know what Greg thinks about
Well,
the future
no, you
of his
don't.
death or his remains.
Well,
I'm going to take a break now. I'll come back with a final comment just before we close out.
I just wanted to add that
Okay.
it is fantastic to have conversations about death and dying because it is a process we can't avoid. And having just dealt with 2 deaths, one totally unprepared for and one almost prepared for, it's left. Too many things are left for the next generation or those who survive you to deal with. I think the conversations need to be held much sooner with your family, your friends, or your loved ones, the people who you think are going to be around to take care of you and take care of your wishes. And I think that is probably one of the bigger comforts you can give to somebody who is facing that final transition of their life.
My mother was so great because she told me a lot of things in just a subtle way. She said, when we die, get that realtor down the street to sell our house because you and your brother aren't going to come back and live in this small town. And just get a dump truck and back it up to the front door and take everything in here and take it to the dump. This is our stuff. It's old. You have your own stuff, your own life, and just get rid of it because it's important for you to know that the stuff in this house is not us. So I thought that was a good advice, and it was very clear what to do once my parents were gone. Sell the house, get rid of all the stuff, and we just kind of spread a word around town that we had lots of things to give away, beds and dressers and washing machines and dryers, and it was all gone in 24 hours.
Yeah, that's one of the things that Florence mentioned was recycling. I'm dealing with now a lot of stuff, and I'm trying to find where it could be best be used. It's a sin that in this day and age, people will pay other people to throw out their loved ones' stuff. And stuff is very dear to us right now, but it's not dear to anybody else after we're gone. And so try to figure out where you want things to go. For instance, this station takes old cars, old radios, old people like myself, and puts them behind a mic. So there are things to think about in advance. The only question I had for the group is for Florence, as the youngest, have you had this conversation with your, say, parents, if you still have them?
That's a good question. I did mention to my mom, like, if something happened to me, like, what to do with my pets, maybe.
What about what to do with your mom's stuff? Have you had that conversation? It's not easy, is the point.
Yeah. I think my mom probably has things in order. I know her wishes that, she doesn't want to, if she doesn't have any quality of life, she doesn't, want to be here. But yeah, as far as stuff, it's definitely not been a conversation in detail.
Yeah, I will add that moving a body across the state line is difficult and expensive. Moving an urn full of ashes, piece of cake. Just throw that in.
Right.
Aralyn, thank you so much for being here. This is Aralyn 2. We expect to have Aralyn 3 and Aralyn 4 in our third and fourth quarters. The conversation and the guests are up to Aralyn, and I am here to facilitate. I wanted to give you, with the couple of minutes we have left here, any last words, Mary Catherine?
I can't think of anything. I've expressed all that I could, so I'm going to be gone, so it doesn't matter to me. And I actually have had this conversation with my family and daughters, and I have all the paperwork in order, so...
Aralyn, I understand from going to your coffee clots that you've been to a lawyer and got everything squared away.
Pretty much. I have a lot of additional things that I have written up that are
they
not
collect
legal
like
documents.
Barnacles, don't they? All your stuff collects like barnacles on our lives.
Well,
Ken, what about you?
No, I'm just happy to be part of the group when I do make it to Austin and Aralyn's coffee group, and People there, it's all, you get to be like a family real quick. People like to talk about all their ideas openly.
And Florence, what will you take to your future from this conversation?
I think that I will have, I feel, reminded to just have more of these conversations and inspired to, because I think, it just opens people's minds and maybe can dispel fear.
Yeah. So, one last thing, Aralyn?
Yes, I was just going to say that I have my eco burial site already paid for and picked out. It's not too far from the airport, and I know they're going to bury me at the right depths, so you won't see any of my body parts out on the airport tarmac. But you get to have one little rock. You don't get to have a tombstone. You just get to have a small rock beside where you're buried. And I am getting my rock, but I know what I'm going to say on the rock, and it is going to say my obituary, which is, she never ran out of things to talk about. She just ran out of time.
Well,
See you next time.
That's the best way to end our show. We're going to go out with a selection from and this is the original Blood, Sweat, and Tears album, When I Die.
I'm not scared of dying, and I don't really care. If it's peace you find in dying, well then let the time be near. If it's peace you find in dying, and if dying time is near, just bundle up my coffin, 'cause it's cold way down there. I hear that it's cold way down there, yeah, crazy cold way down there. And when I die, and when I'm gone, there'll be one child born in this world carrying